I stood outside Michael's bedroom door that Saturday afternoon with a basket of clean laundry balanced on my hip. The house was quiet except for the distant hum of the washing machine finishing its cycle. At 62 years old, I had learned that some moments in life arrive without warning, changing everything you thought you understood. My son had been living back home for 6 months now. After his divorce, he had nowhere else to go, and truth be told, I was grateful for the company. The house had felt too empty since my husband Robert passed 3 years ago. Michael was 38, working long hours as an accountant downtown, and we had settled into an easy rhythm of coexistence. He made coffee in the mornings. I cooked dinner most evenings. We watched the news together and talked about simple things. I knocked twice as I always did. When there was no answer, I turned the handle slowly and pushed the door open. What I saw stopped me in my tracks. Michael was sitting on the edge of his bed, shoulders shaking, his face buried in his hands. On the nightstand beside him was a framed photograph I had never seen before. A young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile looked out from behind the glass. My son, my steady and sensible son, who rarely showed emotion, was crying. The laundry basket nearly slipped from my grasp. In all his years, through scraped knees and high school heartbreaks, and even his divorce, I had never seen Michael cry like this. Not with such raw, unguarded grief. Michael, my voice came out softer than I intended. He looked up, startled. His eyes were red and swollen. For a moment, he seemed like he might try to compose himself, to put on the brave face he had worn for so many years. But instead, something in him crumbled. He just shook his head, unable to speak. I set the laundry basket down and crossed the room. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting gentle shadows across the hardwood floor. I sat down beside him on the bed, the mattress dipping slightly under my weight, and I waited. That is something you learn after 6 decades of living. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is simply be present and wait. After a long moment, he picked up the photograph and handed it to me. His hands trembled slightly. "Her name was Sarah," he said quietly. "We worked together 5 years ago. Before I married Jennifer. Before everything." I looked down at the young woman in the picture. She had one of those faces that radiated warmth, the kind of person you instinctively trust. She was standing in front of what looked like a library, holding a stack of books and laughing at something beyond the camera's view. "She was the kindest person I ever knew," Michael continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She volunteered at the children's hospital every Saturday. She remembered everyone's birthday. She once spent an entire afternoon helping an elderly man at work figure out his computer, even though it had nothing to do with her job." He paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "I loved her, Mom. I really loved her. But I was too afraid to tell her. I kept thinking there would be more time, that I would wait until the right moment, until I was more successful, until I had everything figured out." My heart ached for him. I had seen that fear before in my own life, in the lives of friends, in the quiet regrets people carry. "And then she got sick," he said, his voice breaking. "Cancer. It happened so fast. 6 months from diagnosis to..." He could not finish the sentence. By the time I realized what I had lost, she was gone. I married Jennifer a year later, trying to move forward, trying to convince myself that I could build a life with someone else. But it was never right. It was never what I felt with Sarah. I reached over and took his hand. His fingers closed around mine, holding on like he used to when he was a little boy afraid of thunderstorms. "I found this photo yesterday while cleaning out some old boxes," he said, "and it just hit me all over again. All the things I never said. All the moments I wasted being afraid." We sat there together in the quiet of his room. Outside, I could hear birds singing in the oak tree, the same tree Michael used to climb as a child. Life moved forward relentlessly, whether we were ready or not. You know, I said slowly, your father and I almost didn't get together. Michael looked at me, surprised. In 40 years of marriage, this was a story I had never told him. I was 23, working as a secretary at the law firm downtown. Robert was one of the lawyers. He asked me to dinner 3 times, and I said no every single time. I was dating someone else, someone safe and predictable, someone who made sense on paper. I smiled at the memory. But Robert was patient. He kept showing up with coffee in the mornings, always remembered to ask how my mother was doing, made me laugh when I was having difficult days. Eventually, I realized that safe and predictable wasn't the same as right. I broke up with the other man and said yes to dinner with your father. Best decision I ever made. But you got your chance, Michael said. That's the difference. Yes, I did, I acknowledged. And I am grateful for that every single day. But Michael, the fact that you did not get to have a life with Sarah does not make what you felt any less real. Love does not stop being love just because circumstances prevented it from becoming what you hoped. He was quiet, absorbing this. Your father used to say that the heart is big enough to hold many truths at once. You can carry grief for what you lost with Sarah and still find joy again. You can honor her memory while opening yourself up to new possibilities. Those things do not cancel each other out. I don't know if I can, he whispered. You can, I said firmly. Not today, maybe not tomorrow. But you can. Because that is what Sarah would want for you. People who are truly kind, who love deeply. They never want their absence to become a prison for those they leave behind. Michael leaned his head against my shoulder, just like he used to do when he was small, and the world felt too big and confusing. I put my arm around him and held him while he cried. The afternoon light shifted across the room, warm and golden, full of the promise that even our darkest moments are temporary. Tell me about her, I said gently. Tell me all the things you loved about Sarah. And he did. He talked about her terrible jokes and her collection of mismatched coffee mugs and the way she sang off-key in the break room. He talked about her dreams of opening a bookstore and her love of rainy days and her ability to make everyone around her feel seen and valued. He talked for nearly an hour, and I listened to every word, holding space for his grief and his love and his regret. When he finally grew quiet, I squeezed his hand. She sounds like she was extraordinary, I said. And you were lucky to have known her, even if it was not for as long as you wanted. I was, he agreed softly. I really was. We sat together a while longer. Eventually, I picked up the laundry basket and began putting his clothes away. He wiped his eyes and stood up, placing Sarah's photograph carefully on his dresser where he could see it. Not hidden away in a box, but present, acknowledged, honored. That evening, we made dinner together. Michael told me more stories about Sarah while we chopped vegetables and stirred soup. We laughed at some of them. We grew quiet at others. And slowly, I watched something shift in my son. The weight he had been carrying alone began to lighten just a little, because it was finally shared. Love, I have learned, is not only about the relationships we build. It is also about the grace we extend to ourselves and others when those relationships do not unfold as we hoped. It is about holding tenderly both what was and what might have been, and finding the courage to keep our hearts open despite the risk of loss. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about Sarah, a young woman I never met, but who had touched my son's life so profoundly. I said a quiet thank you to her, wherever she was, for showing Michael what real love felt like. And I prayed that someday, when he was ready, he would find it again.